From Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine in Cleveland, Ohio, this is the All Access Med School Admissions Podcast. Hello again, everybody. I'm your host, Christian Essman, and I'm the Senior Director of Admissions and Financial Aid here at the medical school. Welcome back. Great to have you. Before we get into talking about Rutgers, I want to first let you know about an opportunity to learn more about different medical schools, which is what I'm all about and why I'm here. And you can do this all in one place at the AAMC's Virtual Medical School Fair coming up on March 28th and 29th here in this year, 2023. So the AAMC tends to host about 2, sometimes 3 of these virtual fairs each year, usually once or twice in the spring and then one in the fall. And they've been hosting these for a little over 3 years now, and they use a pretty slick platform that allows you to stop by virtual med school booths, and you can use chat features to ask questions of the med school admissions people and oftentimes students that are in those virtual booths. So it's pretty convenient. So now I mentioned that this is a 2-day event, and the first day on the 28th includes a series of panel presentations covering there's a whole variety of pre-application topics. In fact, I was lucky enough to be invited to be on one of those panels, and I'll be on the panel that starts today at 11 a.m. Eastern Time with some admissions deans, and it's called An Inside Look at How Admissions Committees Review Applications. So it should be interesting and pretty lively. And then after that, there will be other sessions throughout that afternoon, including mock interviews with real admissions advisor officers, tips on preparing for the AAMC's preview exam, knowing when, where, and how to reapply, and how to write an impactful personal statement. So that would be helpful. And then on the 29th, so day 2, that will be then the virtual med school fair that I just talked about, where you can shop around to different med schools that you're interested in and maybe not very familiar with, and bounce in and out of these virtual booths. So our team will be there hosting a booth along with our colleagues from our Cleveland Clinic Learner Program and MSTP. So stop by our virtual booth and ask your questions. It's also worth mentioning that these sessions through the AAMC are free for both days, and all you have to do is register for it, and I've included a link in the show description for the registration, and also it includes a lot more detail on how those days are going to unfold. So block out March 28th and 29th on your calendar, and I hope we see you there. All right, we're here today to talk about Rutgers Robert Wood Johnson Medical School with Dr. Liesel Copeland. And before I tell you about Dr. Copeland, here is a brief description of the medical school. It's located about 45 minutes south of New York City in Piscataway, New Jersey. You'll find the Rutgers University Robert Wood Johnson Medical School. The medical school operates campuses in Piscataway and New Brunswick in New Jersey, with a broad range of clinical programs conducted at multiple hospital affiliates and numerous ambulatory care sites in the region. The school is named after Robert Wood Johnson II, who is the former president and chairman of the board of Johnson & Johnson. Prior to July 2013, Robert Wood Johnson Medical School was part of the University Dentistry of New Jersey, or used to be called for short UMDNJ. The mission of Robert Wood Johnson Medical School is dedicated to transforming healthcare for New Jersey and the nation through innovation and excellence in education, research, patient and family-centered care, and addressing the health of diverse communities. They meet this mission with a vision to become the academic engine driving a new healthcare paradigm in New Jersey, the state's first and largest academic high-value healthcare system. In 2021, the medical school launched the 5 C's curriculum: curiosity, critical thinking, clinical skills, competence, and compassion, which we'll talk about during our conversation. This curriculum will train graduates as resilient and adaptable physician leaders who provide high-value, ethical, and appropriate healthcare in an ever-changing system, communicate respectfully and effectively in a patient and family-centered fashion, collaborate with other healthcare professionals to devise treatment plans and strategies for adherence and self-care tailored to the needs and preferences of the patient, integrate the scientific underpinnings of clinical medicine and best evidence into daily practice, and distinguish themselves as medical professionals in discovery, service, and leadership. Rutgers accepts applications from in-state and out-of-state U.S. residents and accepts applications from Canadian and international applicants on a case-by-case basis. Applicants with the DACA status are also permitted to apply. It is important to note that this medical school has some minimum academic and MCAT requirements to apply, so take a close look at those requirements prior to adding them to your AMCAS application, and this is something we specifically discuss in my conversation today. Finally, this year, they received 5,778 applications, and they will interview approximately 500 for a class of 165. They also have an MD-PhD program. My guest today is Dr. Liesel Copeland, and she obtained her doctorate at the University of Virginia in educational research. She completed her postdoc in medical education program evaluation in educational research at the Cleveland Clinic Foundation and has fond memories of Cleveland. We touch on those a little bit in the introduction too. Gaining experience working as an independent program evaluator for interdisciplinary doctoral training programs at universities in the Northeast, she was delighted to join Robert Wood Johnson Medical School in 2014. As Assistant Dean of Medical Education and Admissions, she has the unique opportunity to support educational research and evaluation at the medical school, as well as work within admissions. The combined focus on evaluation, curriculum, and admissions ensures that a broad perspective is taken in admissions and that there is a shared understanding of the school culture. So there you go. Hey, let's jump right into it with Dr. Liesel Copeland. Enjoy. Hi, Liesel. So glad to have you here. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. It's nice to see you again.
Likewise. So we just saw each other recently in Nashville for the AAMC conference, and we need to talk. So we're finally able to get this together and get on each other's schedules. So I'm really grateful for your time today to talk a little bit more about your medical school. Before we get into all that, though, you have some ties to Cleveland. What are some of your memories of spending your time here in the land?
I did. I really enjoyed my time in Cleveland.
Who doesn't?
It has a small town feel, but it has some of the amenities of a city. At least that was my take on it.
I use those words all the time.
And yeah, maybe the official title, but I do remember, I think one of the things I really enjoyed, and I'm not going to remember the name of it, but there was a playhouse. So I worked at the Cleveland Clinic Foundation, and there was a playhouse maybe 8 blocks down from there. And they ran a series for under 35 professionals. You could get a discounted buy tickets to every play.
Oh my gosh.
It was amazing because you could walk down, you work, and on Friday at 8 p.m. you're done with work. You walk down, you go see the play and come back. And it was really good theater. It was just right there.
Cool.
I loved it. My husband's really into the symphony. So we also were on the Case campus and world-class symphony. And so I think that just that it was so accessible. And sure, right now I'm really close to New York City. It just doesn't have that. It's just so much more work. It's just harder to go get it.
Yeah, you get great opportunities there in New York, no doubt, world-class things coming through town. But it's probably a little more work to get there and do those things.
There's something about being on a lake. There's the park system that surrounds the city. I remember going and seeing the waterfall frozen completely, and just visiting that.
Cool.
It was just great to be able to have access to, because I am an outdoorsy person. I like to do the walking and not serious hiking, but that regular. And so it was a wonderful place to be.
Oh, that's cool. Well, now you found yourself in Piscataway. What do you like doing there?
So I do find as we've moved from place to place, a lot has to do with where you are in your life. So when I moved to Piscataway, my oldest child was born about 6 months later. And so Piscataway has been all about children for me. And so I go to the concerts. We volunteer at the food bank. It has been great to be growing up in Piscataway with children. It's a really diverse township. My children have had amazing school experiences. And I can't imagine a better place for them to have grown up. And New Jersey, because it's a small state, even though it's the most densely populated state in the nation, it does mean that I can get to the shore and do a day trip at the ocean. I can go to the mountains and do a day trip there. I could go down to Philadelphia or New York City. So it's and I know that people in New Jersey will be upset I didn't mention anything in Jersey, but I do find that we travel fairly far afield. And so we're doing a lot of the New Jersey hikes and the New Jersey beaches, but we're also going to other states very easily.
Oh, that's great. Cool.
So, and it's been just it is suburban where I am. I didn't know suburbs until I moved here. But it means we've developed great relationships with the community.
Yeah, sounds fantastic. Before we get into kind of the nitty gritty about curricular highlights, it's probably important to start with the distinction between Rutgers University, Robert Wood Johnson Medical School, and Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School, because I even started to get a little, I'm like, wait, when I went to MSAR, I'm like, wait, is this the right one? Oh, no, it's that, So what's the similarities and differences between the two?
So it's important to understand that they are two separate medical schools. They are accredited separately. We have separate curriculum. The admissions is a separate process. I would say as a New Jersey resident, you are going to be applying to both schools. They are both public state schools. It makes sense. They have the name Rutgers because a governor of New Jersey decided to take the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey and merge it under Rutgers University. And so we share some resources in terms of library databases. But we're on, so that's the Rutgers part. But otherwise it's two entirely separate schools. Okay. So it's easiest just not think about it as Rutgers, but think about it as two medical schools. So yes, some of it is we have access to some of the Big Ten things, which is great because now we're part of Rutgers, but separate schools. New Jersey Medical School is up in Newark. We're in Central Jersey, in Piscataway, New Brunswick area. Every school has their own feel. I do strongly believe you can get an amazing education at any medical school.
Likewise.
But it's just somewhat different. And mostly location.
And then I read that there's another new medical school down the road in Hackensack, Meridian. That's a new one. Isn't that? It's I think they're recruiting the first class right now.
They, yes. So they have been, we have 4 medical schools, I believe, in New Jersey. And then we have a couple of osteopathic schools as well. And so there are options here, which is great. I think it's great healthcare. A lot of different hospitals that you can train in.
Oh, that's great. Cool. Well, let's focus then on the Robert Wood Johnson version of Rutgers University.
Of course.
Yeah. Okay, Liesel, well, let's just start with now that we know the differences between the two Rutgers medical schools. Let's talk about some curricular highlights about your medical school. And from what I read, it sounds like you have a newer curriculum, the 5 C's.
Yes. We are excited to update our curriculum. We have gone to the 3-phase curriculum, which I realize a few medical schools have gone to, but I like the focus we give on it, and being driven by that 5 C's and thinking about the curiosity, thinking about the critical reasoning and the compassion and so forth. I think one of the highlights is our physicianship course. And this is the doctoring course, the patient-centered medicine course that other schools integrate, and many schools do. But for us, we start with that course so we can get our students more familiar with the community. We can embed them into developing that professional identity. And then we regularly revisit it. And so let's say after your cardiovascular systems course, you're going to go into a physicianship practice and development block. And that's where you're going to learn about heart sounds. You're going to learn how to take a history and physical targeted toward patients that have cardiovascular disease. And so it's cool. A nice way to just reinforce that connection between the basic and clinical science and grow as you're in your pre-clerkship curriculum.
So not just start off with it and be like, okay, that was nice. It was a nice introduction, and then forget it because we're moving on to the sciences of medicine, but to keep kind of dripping it from time to throughout the blocks or the phases as they go through the first, is it all three?
So that's,
all 3 years?
It looks a little different as you go through the phases. So it's definitely, you purposely are going in and spending a week revisiting throughout that pre-clerkship phase. In the clerkship phase, what we have done is we embed important concepts from the physicianship course within the clerkships. But for 4 of our clerkships, we have tied them together so that we can do this sort of integrated session at the end of them that really tries to remind you of the connections across medicine.
Cool.
And so we've tied pediatrics and OB-GYN together, and then you're going to spend 2 weeks thinking about what are the interplays, what are the differences and the connections between the two, and revisit some of that physicianship concept. And so, like stereotypically, if you think about you have a pregnant mom and how do you advise them about taking medication, think about the fetus as well. And so it makes sense. And then we've done the same thing for family medicine and psychiatry, and thinking about mental health, thinking about the whole care from the child to an adult, and tying those two together as well.
Wow. It's pretty longitudinal across the spectrum.
It's our version of the longitudinal clerkship. So you're doing very independent 5 weeks within a clerkship, and then you have some time to blend them.
Wow. What about, so since it's a newer version of the curriculum, what's the mix of, is it largely lecture? Is it small group? Is it team based? Like what does that look like in like the first 2 years of how students can find what their days kind of look like?
So in that first phase, it is a mix. We've kept it fairly similar. We are increasing our active learning activities, but every course will have some large group lectures, and they all will have some small group sessions. And so we have jigsaws, we have some case-based learning activities. Even in the large group, we will do some for classrooms. And then the physicianship, it's a lot more small group discussions. You have a group you're assigned to, so 13 students are going to stay together across the entire physicianship course in that pre-clerkship. And you're running your OSCEs there. You're practicing with your standardized patients. You're getting some simulation embedded in that.
Okay. You mentioned something I've not heard before, jigsaws. What are jigsaws?
I know. I knew you were going to ask me. I should have looked up. So it's a term, I think it's similar to a problem-based learning, where they're going to give you a case. They're going to split you into 5 different groups. You're going to sort of each person work on a piece of it and then put it all together.
It's
and
like a puzzle.
Yes,
I get it.
Puzzle. But it's. I think other schools do a similar activity and they just name it differently.
Okay. Yeah, cool. When it comes to research, this is a common question that I think a lot of schools get. What kind of research opportunities do students have?
We have some amazing research going on. So we have recently started an addiction research center.
Oh, wow.
Got in a world-renowned physician and researcher to lead that center. We have the CASPer Institute of New Jersey is located on our campus in New Brunswick. We have a Child Health Institute. So I do think, and then of course we have our basic science departments, and so you can do your microbiology and biochemistry as well. So I like that it's a mix, that you get some translational research opportunities if you want. We have some people doing more of a community-based program evaluation. And so our research is not always that stereotypical research background. Nice. So I think there's lots of opportunities. I think not all our students will fully focus on that. Yeah. My senior associate dean for education likes to refer to it as liberal arts medical school, in that you can customize. You can be really research focused, or you can be service research focused.
And that kind of takes me to, I wanted to ask you about these programs of distinction.
Yes.
And that sounds like where you're kind of able to tailor your interests. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Yep, that's correct. And so it's sort of like getting a certificate. You'll get a notation on your transcript that says you graduated with an MD and a distinction in. And so this is definitely where you're tailoring it. If you really are a research person, you may want to do a distinction in research. And it has some requirements in it. You're going to have to do a few extra seminars. You're definitely going to have to do a project and find a mentor and work on that. The different we have 9 distinction programs. So the requirements differ a lot differently between them. Some are a little bit more course-based, but all of them require that scholarly work and that scholarly project.
But you don't have to do one. It's just an option. Yeah.
Okay. It is just an option.
Yeah. Your website's really well done. I'll put a link to that. You have a special page for those programs for distinction. So I'll put a link to that in the description of the show here. So people, if they want to go dive a little deeper into that, but it has everything from distinctions from bioethics to inclusion and diversity to research and all kinds of things in between. One is
medical humanities. So
I'm sure that's very appealing to people. What about, so you mentioned a little bit about Piscataway, and how do students and you that you got involved in the community, like going to the food bank with your kids and stuff like that when they were younger? How do you see medical students getting involved in the community if they want to?
Yeah, I do love our students, and partially because they are so engaged. I think probably we're looking for that a little bit in admissions, but they really are proactive in reaching out. We have a student-run health clinic in New Brunswick that serves the uninsured and the underinsured. And as part of that, we also have what's called Hip Hop, which serves... It reaches out to the community. And so they're working, maybe going to the fairs and doing blood pressure clinics, or they're going to the high schools and they're giving, safe sex talk. They're going out to other communities to talk about diabetes and to integrate. And then we have some students that really want to do more, and they may do that distinction program, and then they're going to go and they're going to work with a community partner. We have one that's looking at preventing teenage dating violence. We have an amazing leader, Susan Giordano, that has built these connections with community partners, because we don't want our students to start a project and then leave the partner. And so these students do start projects, but we make sure that we're working with our partners, we're working with the liaison, and they're passing the projects from student to student, so we can maintain these connections.
Oh yeah. Well, it sounds like there's a lot of diverse opportunities if they can kind of find their area maybe of interest in the community there that they want to do some outreach in or get involved in. We've talked about Piscataway in New Brunswick.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more about how that works.
Yes. Our pre-clerkship curriculum and the courses is in Piscataway. My office is in Piscataway, but we do have a split campus. So you spend your first 18 months in Piscataway, and then you're going to go into New Brunswick, where our primary teaching hospital is. It's right across the river. You honestly could bike the difference.
Oh, no kidding.
It's probably... I might not be able to bike it. I'm not the most biking.
But if you're young and resilient, you could bike that.
But you could technically. It's, I would say, a 7-minute drive.
Okay. It's not far.
Between the two. So our primary teaching hospital is in New Brunswick. That's where you're going to get your clinical experiences. If you're going to do what we call offsites during your first year, where you're going out and you're starting to get some exposure to that, you're usually going to New Brunswick to do that. We have other affiliated teaching hospitals across New Jersey. So you may, in your third and fourth year, you're going to be a little bit more spread in the state. But you will always do at least one clerkship at Robert Johnson University Hospital
in New Brunswick.
Okay.
Yep. Oh, wow. Interesting. I'm glad I asked. I wasn't aware that it also could spread out to other parts of the state too.
Yeah. And New Brunswick has it's more of a city. And so the train stations there, you can get to New York City or Philly from New Brunswick. So it's got, Piscataway's definitely got the suburban feel. Yeah. And New Brunswick's got, not New York City, but a little bit more of a city feel.
It can then lead you to other larger areas if you want to branch out a little more. Before we go any farther, as far as like other programs and stuff, since you have one of your hats is in evaluation, right?
Yes.
How are your students evaluated? What are the tests like that they take, let's say, in the first 2 years?
So in the pre-clerkship, we do use a lot of multiple choice tests. We feel that it's best to help them in preparing them for those licensure exams to try to use similar type exams. But we're also using an OSCE. So in your physicianship course, you are getting rated more on the rubrics that are used in the clinical setting. And so that's that 5-point scale, but a lot of normative and formative feedback is given. And the standardized patient is also giving you formative feedback on the communication skills. So that piece is in there. We do some lab practicals as well. But in the majority is those MCQs.
Okay. Yeah. So for people that are listening that aren't familiar with some of our internal jargon, an OSCE is an objective structured clinical exam. So it's depending on the school and how they do it, but it's basically you're working with a standardized patient or a real patient, and you're evaluated on how you perform with that patient and like getting some feedback on how that interaction and what the things you did, how that all went. So I think all med schools use OSCEs. Sometimes we call it different things, but it's a way of evaluating how students are interacting with patients.
Yeah. And as you said, it is helping you learn. And so I do think in that pre-clerkship curriculum, and most schools probably do this as well, is that it is a chance for you to practice. It's how do I ask these questions in a patient and family-centered way? How do I figure out that decision making on what's important information I should focus on and what may not be as important? So it's a great opportunity for students.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, practicing is in that setting where it's a safe setting to be able to do that with, usually it's with a standardized patient, and to be able to make mistakes and to be able to go back and go like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I said that. That's how you learn and how you fine tune your shtick and the way you speak with people and the questions you want to ask them and come to some differentials and things like that. So that's great. And it's pass fail in the first 2 years, right?
Yes, we are pass fail in the pre-clerkship.
Yep. Big fan of that. Big fan. What about when it comes to, Liesel, student support for students that come from affinity groups like LGBT and are some of our minoritized populations? How do students, how do they get support at your school?
Yes, we have a couple ways. And so we do have student groups. We have over 52 student interest groups, and we definitely have SMA and SNMA as well as saga for the sexual and gender minorities and groups. We also have an active wellness session. Our student affairs deans are really accessible. And so I think they definitely find support among themselves, but we're definitely trying to give them exposure to professionals, to the other practicing physicians, so that they can ask those questions. They can say, this is how I develop. This is how I can see my role and accepting of my role and proactively fighting for more justice and equity with the mentors and the faculty I'm working with. We actually have a transgender health clinic at the hospital that was recently started.
That's great.
It just opens up more possibility of getting exposure, of learning more, of working with patients. So it's been interesting to listen to those physicians.
Yeah, and how these things have evolved and over the time, and more students can find the groups that they identify with and feel supported with them. That's something I've seen in that my time here, just how that's become much more acceptable and important for student support. So students from different groups and communities can feel like they can connect with somebody who is a professional and kind of attach themselves to them and share identities and learn from them and stuff. So that's wonderful. What about any other highlights that you want to talk about, that when you're going out and standing behind the table at the recruiting fair, what are some of those other things that you like prospective students to know about Robert Wood Johnson?
I do. So what is our pitch? Actually, I know that many schools probably say this, but I really do think it's the people. Our students are really warm. They're very collaborative. I agree with you. I think the pass fail in the first 18 months, it's so hard to get used to how long is it now? I think that helps. I think that promotes it. Our students develop study groups together. The other thing I like to say is I do think we're training you to go anywhere you want. I think it's a real world environment, right? And so you can go to that high end research academic center for residency program, or you can go to the primary care. Maybe they don't have all the resources, but they're really embedded in the community. And I think because you can a little bit carve your path, because we have affiliation with both community hospitals as well as academic hospitals, you can get that experience and training as you're going through medical school.
Yeah. What about, what do you hear current students say that they kind of like most about going to medical school there? Like maybe whispers you're hearing, or not whispers, but things you hear in the hallway, or students that you kind of bump into. Yeah. What kind of things have you picked up on that they say they really like about being there?
So they like the flexibility and they like the accessibility. And so our faculty aren't going to necessarily reach out and say, please, I've got this project. It's perfect for you. Please come help me. But if you reach out to them and say, oh my gosh, that's so interesting, they love it and they're going to work with you. Flexibility is, and sometimes honestly, from an administrator, I'm like, are you sure we want to do this? But you have an interest group, you're dying to start. You can get a couple people that agree with you that this would be a great opportunity. And you go to student affairs and they'll be like, yep, it's done. Yeah. You can have it. And so I think that, so whether it's you picking the distinction program for you, or whether it's, I want a group. We had someone start, they call it Miles for Smiles. And it's like a walking running club, which every day I'm like, I should join up. I should sign up and go to there after class today. We're going to go do a 5K. And I'm like, I should do that. And I don't, but I know they would welcome me as a faculty member, and every student's welcome to join too. And so I think that it's a supportive environment, and that's.
It sounds like the student affairs group tends to foster this creativity, and for students, like you said, like if they have an idea and there's a group of them that all have a similar something like-mindedness in some area, like, hey, can we start a group on this? And like, sure, let's let it go get it, and give it a whirl. So great. Anything else that you'd like people to know about, or do you want to just dive right into some of the admissions related things?
think we can dive in. I think sometimes it comes up as you're talking.
Yeah.
Like,
but I wanted to hit some of those highlights there that I think make it sound like your school's unique compared to some other places. And so, and I'll put links to some of the things that we talked about in the show description. So people can, if they want to go do a deeper dive into this, they can do that. But I will say, I want to compliment you on your MSAR. It's really well done. Like the way you guys wrote about things, it's so comprehensive. It comes across as so friendly. Like there's one section, it's like, you will be greeted by our gracious staff and our missions team or something. Like, it's so nice. Like I was reading, like, this is really, I'm going to maybe borrow some of these things.
Good. Thank you. No, my senior associate dean for education is really helpful. And she has great skills, the language skills in studying that. And it's funny you say that because I just asked the director of admissions who works for me. I just told her, like, you prove everything for me. This is what you're in charge in next year.
Yeah.
You now them servers.
Yeah, this is your baby.
This is yours. It is hard. It's hard within that character limitation. I don't know how some schools do it. And I agree. And I'm like, first thing you're going to do is you're going to read other schools and get some ideas of where do you emphasize and where don't you? And how do you, something different even, or something like, oh, that triggered a thought for me.
Yeah.
Because it can be hard sometimes.
Same thing happens to me. Yep. I'm looking around and I'm like, okay, that's a good idea to put in there because it's really helpful for then. So for people that maybe are new and haven't listened for a long time, the MSAR is the Medical School Admissions Requirements, essentially an online guide. And so all allopathic medical schools have their own like web page and they're all laid out the same. So it's not like you have to go and figure out the navigation. They're all laid out the same. And then we detail our admissions process, curricular highlights, contact information and stuff. And so it's a really good resource. The new version, I think the 23-24 version is going to be coming out relatively soon because the deadline to submit was last Friday and I was submitting ours last Friday. So I think that the new version will be coming out soon and it's not that expensive. I think it's $30 or something like that to get access to, something around there. So I've had students say like that was some of the best $30 they spent in this whole process. So it's a great tool to search for med school, allopathic medical schools and get a feel for them. And then you can go do a deeper dive into, and you can compare schools. You can line them up to ones you want to compare and things like that. So great resource. Anyway. All right. So let's talk about some of the admissions pieces here. I mean, when I was doing my research, I was highlighting some stuff. There's so many things I want to ask you about here. Okay. So the first thing is, like, I noticed that your school, your admissions process has some application cutoffs based on GPAs and MCATs. Do you want to talk about that a little bit and how that works?
Yes. So we do advertise that we have minimum thresholds. We think it's only fair to the applicants to know. So we require a cumulative undergraduate GPA of a 3.0. So that's not science, it's everything. And we're using the AMCAS calculation. And so I do like to tell applicants that, if you took a class at the community college when you're in high school, that's going to go into that calculation. Or you took a class afterwards because you were curious about something and after you graduated, that's going to go into it. So we do have that. We do allow a 2.9 if you have graduate science coursework. The MCAT, we also require a 498 total score and a 123 in each of the subsections. Okay. So if you're at MSAR, you do see that our averages are higher, but we feel that those baselines will ensure that you'll be successful in the curriculum, and then we're able to accept that full range. Okay. So once you meet the baseline, we'll send you a secondary and we'll do a review of your application.
So I think the first thing to be mindful of is you should know what your metrics are before you check Rutgers, Robert Wood Johnson off on AMCAS, because once you check that off, like you have to pay AMCAS to send the application to Robert Wood Johnson. But if you don't meet the threshold, then they're not going to send you the secondary. So you will, and AMCAS won't give you your money back because you checked them off and didn't know about the cutoffs. So yes. I bet, and this is not just a Rutgers thing. Like the other med schools have some cutoffs. So you really need to do kind of your homework and hear conversations like this to understand the process a little bit.
Yes. No, I think it's really valid. It's such an expensive process to apply to medical school that I just feel horrible when I'm not sending a secondary, and we don't want to send a secondary to somebody that doesn't meet the threshold.
Yeah.
So it definitely that is a good thing. You can get an updated MCAS score, but you have to have that by October of the application year. And so you need to be aware as you're submitting, like where you stand and what you're looking for in a school.
If a student is unsure if they meet like the undergraduate GPA, but yet they have a graduate GPA, like they went and did a master's program, can they check with your office? Like, do you guys ever like take just like, hey, can you just look this over? Do I meet these expectations or not?
Yes. So we do welcome emails and reaching out, and we try to be fast in our response. Sometimes it takes us a little bit more time. Yeah, I get it. And we will set up calls if you have a bunch of questions, and we'll try to make sure we find some time to give you some feedback and talk through that application process. Okay. I think that prereqs is another place where I encourage people to check, because it's different undergrads use different names for the colleges, and we're really quite flexible. And so just don't assume it doesn't work and you have to take an extra class. Definitely write an email, check with us first, and we'll let you know. Yeah.
Yeah. We get some of those emails too. My advice would be write a brief email, like with like your question about that course. And if you can include a short description about the course, that's helpful to us, because we get some volume that comes in. And like you said, we can't reply immediately, but because we all kind of run lean. But it's helpful if it's like a short email, quick question, not like 10 questions embedded in 3 pages of an email.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
It is short. And there's some that, some is fast. So we have, English or intensive writing. And I think that causes the most questions. They're like, well, I didn't take an English class. I'm like, it's okay. You probably still qualify, right? Did you have a philosophy course that had a lot of writing in it? Yeah. That will count towards the requirement. And so definitely check. Check with your schools.
Oh, great. Good. I'm glad I asked that. Okay. The other thing that I thought was a little unique that I underlined was the situational judgment tests that you require the situational judgment test, but you will accept CASPer or the AAMC's preview.
Yes.
How does that work? And how do you use it in the evaluation process?
Okay. So to be honest, in the upcoming cycle, so in 24 is the first time we're going to allow either. We have been using the CASPer test for quite a few years now. Okay. My admissions committee really values having a situational judgment test, but they're so driven by being fair. And so when the AAMC preview exam came out and was more available and more used, we didn't want to switch totally to it for 2 reasons. One, my admissions committee wants more data. They want to understand the test for themselves a little bit first. And 2, they don't want a student to have to take both tests. They want to know that the schools around us that students are likely to be applying to are requiring one or other, so that it's not an added expense just for us. So I don't know down the road 5 years from now what we'll be doing. We may switch and use one or the other. But because preview is being used for the first time next year, we definitely wanted to allow either. Okay. And it is going to be a learning process, but I'm comfortable with it because of the way we use that. And so it's a way for me to triangulate data, or for my reviewers to triangulate data. We only use it in the screening and in the review process. We don't use it at the final decision point. Okay. And so when they're looking at it, those situational judgment tests are getting at those pre-professional competencies. And so maybe it's just one score, but it's telling us that yes, you scored high on this. Yes, you have the experiences there that suggest you have these pre-professional competencies. I'm reassured that you're coming into this school with this skill set and with this knowledge base. And so, you're getting a little bit from letters of rec. You're getting a little bit from the personal statement. You're getting a little bit from those 15 experiences or 8 experiences you've listed. And then we're also getting a little bit from the situational judgment test. And so I do think the tests are measuring slightly different aspects of that professionalism. So we can't compare score to score. But I think we can get that sense of, are you strong in here? Are you, solid in the score or not?
Yeah.
So it should work.
So putting on my pre-med, I'm going to analyze everything. Do you prefer one or the other? I think I know the answer to this.
I do not prefer one or the other. We definitely, maybe we do, but I won't know it. What I prefer is that you submit the one you've already taken.
Okay.
So you don't have to do another.
What if I've taken both? Can I submit both? Will you see both? If I did better on one than the other, can I choose which one to share with you?
So you can definitely choose which one. I believe the CASPer gives you a quartile, so you won't know exactly what you got, but you can use that to make a judgment call if you want. You can submit both, and I promise we're going to use the higher. Okay. But I know, being your pre-med hat, you're not sure you trust me. But I'm definitely leaving it up to you. We're going to use whichever one is stronger. As I said, I think they're measuring slightly different things. And so I do think there are going to be some differences in the scores if you're sending both to me. I won't ask you whether you decided just to send me just one and you took both. I'm just going with what you sent me. Okay.
So if somebody then is invited to interview, they can pretty much bet you're not going to tell me why you picked this one over that one. You don't even care at that point.
I do not care at that point.
Okay. So let's put that one to bed. So if anybody was contemplating if they should take both, just to take both, or this or that, or just pick the one that you like the best and submit it. Okay. Yep. All right. Well, good. I'm glad I asked. This is why we have these conversations, so it can maybe bring some reassurance.
It is. And it's great because this is new for us. And so it's wonderful. This is getting out there. And
Speaking of multiple tests, if somebody has multiple MCAT scores, I saw an MSAR, it said you take the highest. So do you see all the scores? Is there a threshold of a number of attempts that kind of makes you a little nervous if there's more than a certain number of MCAT attempts? What are your thoughts on that?
I do. And thank you for the question, because I think some applicants don't realize that you can't choose which score to send in. They're all going to go in. And so if a school accepts all scores, they're going to see all scores. We do see all the scores. We do work with the highest score. I would say we are looking for multiple scores. I don't have an official threshold. Yeah. I am concerned when you have 4 or more. It's hard to interpret that. It's hard to interpret where you are and what the judgments calls were made as you were taking these multiple tests. I'm actually sad for the applicants that we are seeing 2 being taken. It's almost become the norm, and I think it's fine. We tend to take the second one. It tends to be higher. There's lots of good reasons of why you took it twice. And so I don't think it's a negative to have taken it twice. It's an expensive, hard test. Yeah. I think it has great strengths. I really value it. I think it helps you get a sense of how you're going to approach medical school curriculum. It's the first place where you're integrating some of your science concepts. So I do value the test, but I don't want anybody to have to sit through that twice.
Yeah. If you can do it well the first time, that's great. But to your point, we do see a lot of applicants who have more than one attempt, typically two. And the AAMC's data shows that usually students who take the test the second time do better the second time. And shows a lot that goes into that. I think personally, I think it's probably like some of its game day jitters, like you just going into the first time and you're just a little nervous. And then second time, you kind of know what to expect and maybe you prepared slightly differently.
Yep. And I think that some of what we might be looking for, and there's always an exception. So there may be the person that can sit for the exam a month apart and do better the second time. But really, we're looking for that you took some time, that you got that score back, you thought about it, you reflected on it, you adjusted your study, and you took it again. And so having a little bit break between the tests is probably a good thing. And it's a good thing in my reviewers' minds because it looks like you grew. Yeah. And that's what we're really looking for.
Yep. I'm sure you see some applicants too that they got like a 96 percentile or a 97 percentile and they retake it. It always, not that's a bad thing, but it kind of if it goes down, it's not great, but it kind of makes me, if they do the same or better, it kind of like, what? Okay, that was pretty good to begin with. Why did you?
Yeah. It makes me a little sad because I think you don't necessarily believe in holistic review then if you're doing that, or you're striving for perfection. And I agree with you. The 96th and the 99th, I think, is equally predictive. You look at those tables and you're going to do well given everything else is in place. And so it's not the MCAT that's going to help you. It's everything else. And so, I do see it sometimes. I don't think it harms you necessarily. I mean, if you drop to the 50th percentile, it's concerning. But I don't know where it would help you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So thank you for that. Because sometimes when I see that, I'm like, I wish I would like to have talked to them. Like, what are you doing? Why are you putting yourself through this again?
Yeah.
And it's probably not going to, if you get the same or better, your chances of getting in probably are going to stay about. And plus then it's going to raise a little like eyebrow, like, why'd they retake this? What, like you said, are they shooting for perfection? And that can be concerning to some admissions committee, like, because medicine's not perfect. Students aren't perfect. And you are going to not fail in medical school, but you're going to have times where you need to grow and get better at things and find areas that you have to improve upon.
Yeah, no, I think that's very true. And I know it's probably across many schools where they talk about that you have to become comfortable with the uncomfortable. And there is something about failing earlier, which I think is helpful. And I don't mean massive, big failure, but just the fact that you had to confront that and realize, oh my gosh, that didn't go the way I thought it would go is important. It's an important life experience. And I agree, in medicine, it's really important to be able to handle that.
All right. So what about when it comes to medically related experiences, things like shadowing, volunteering, maybe e-shadowing, patient-facing things? How much value do you and your admissions committee place on that? Is it kind of a unspoken requirement, or you highly recommend it? Where do you come down on that line?
Okay, I would go with the maybe not unspoken requirement, but I would go with the requirement.
Okay.
I do think that, honestly, I'm not an MD, but I think to make it through medical school, you need two things. So yes, you need that capabilities. You need the academic capabilities, but you need that passion for medicine. That you can be a superstar academics, but if you don't love medicine, it's not going to be worth it. You're not going to make it through. And so that's why the medical requirements. I need to know my applicants have a sense of what they're getting into, that they've explored it, that they want medicine. And I've talked to someone about, they were talking to a peer at a different medical school, and they said the peer is struggling And they realized it was because their whole focus was getting into medical school, and they hadn't actually thought past that. And so once they're in, they no longer had a motivator.
Yeah.
And I thought it would never even cross my mind that could be true. But I think that's why the medical experiences was, we want you to remember what your motivator was. We want you to test that and feel that and actually make sure this really, truly is a motivator for you.
Yeah.
So type of experiences, I don't care. I want you to be able, as an applicant, I want to know that you have a sense of the role of the doctor, what that physician does day to day, hour to hour, and that you're comfortable being in a clinical environment, that you've had a conversation with somebody seeking care. Sometimes you can get this through one experience. Maybe you're a medical receptionist at a small family clinic. You both do the scheduling, the checking patients in, and maybe you walk them to the room and you do that first preliminary questions of, how are you doing today? What's up? Often it requires two different experiences.
Yeah.
So maybe you're doing that shadowing and you're volunteering at a hospice.
Right. Or scribing or medical assistant kind of thing. Being in the room, being in the environment.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Good. So it's required.
It is required. It can be a lot of different ones.
Yeah. Where do you land on your feelings on gap years? I haven't seen a lot of applicants taking gap years. What are your feelings on that? Yeah.
So I would say 75% of my matriculating class has taken a year or more.
Ours too.
So I do think it's becoming the more norm.
Yeah.
I think it can be a great thing. There are so many different reasons why a gap year. And so I think as long as you are purposeful about it, you understand, and maybe one gap year is not a purposeful, but when you're applying that, you've thought about, what did this give me? What did I gain from it? That is a good thing.
Yeah. Do you have any general advice for your prospective applicants? Is there anything in particular that, because I think when you look at the typical profile of a pre-med student, they all have a lot of the similar things. It's just, do research, raise your hand. Have you done shadowing? Raise your hand. Have you done volunteering? Raise your hand. And everybody's raising their hand. But which is fine. That's what pre-medical students get ready to apply to med school look like. But is there anything that maybe for Robert Wood Johnson, you are kind of looking for a little bit? Is there any attribute or characteristic that is helpful to you?
Yeah, I have some general advice, but first I'll try to address is there some attribute that we're looking for?
Yeah.
And I think I think most admissions office try to do that evaluation, try to improve, try to reflect. And so as we've changed our curriculum, we have modified a little bit where that focus is. And so we're still looking for the same things, but my focus has shifted somewhat from service orientation, which is still value, and you still need that more to that demonstration of curiosity, of that desire to engage, to explore, to ask questions, to learn, to really, I want to say work. And I'm excited by the shift in our look, but it's hard. It's hard to see in the application. And so this is something that I think my admissions office, as we meet, and every year where you reflect on, okay, where can we make adjustments? How can we improve our screening? How can we think about guidance for our reviewers as they're reading applications? This is where we're going to continue to focus on is where we've seen that. So stereotypically, maybe I am seeing it that you engaged in research and did research, but we accept applicants that don't do research. And so, is it the minor and is that enough? Or is it just that there's a thread to what you're telling me and sort of what you experienced and what you're putting in personal statement? Or I think there's a lot of ways to see it. It's getting more comfortable coaching my reviewers on how do you look for this.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah.
So advice for applicants, I do I heard it on one of these panels discussions we have. Admissions dean from NYU, I think, said, "Tell me your passions and values." And you know what? I'd love that. Because it's not, yes, you need to tell me you've done some clinical experience and you've explored this, right? And it's probably a smart idea to talk about the service orientation, because we do think medical school is service orientation. It's a great idea to look at those pre-professional competencies AAMC discusses and figure out which experiences might demonstrate some of this. But really, this is your only chance to tell me who you are, what you're bringing to the class. And so being reflective when you're thinking about what experiences am I going to share and what am I going to put in this application, right? And so it's that you can write about it in a way that suggests you did engage, that you enjoyed it, that you loved it, or that you have time management skills because you had to work as a car, auto mechanic to produce skills. And what was valuable about that? You must have grown from it. Maybe it's just problem solving skills, but those are valuable skills. Yeah. So I always tell them it's either something you loved or you spent a lot of time on, and hopefully it's the same.
Yeah.
That you loved what you were spending a lot of time on.
And that can be hard, though, to find, to describe it. Like, what are my passions? Like, what are my values? And it takes some time, at least it does for me, to sit down with that and really make it meaningful. And
I think not comparing yourselves to some expectation. And that's what you're saying, is being meaningful. And so, yes, somebody may have had a passion early on, and then you see it. It's in everything that they wrote. But I like the well-rounded applicant that's dabbled here and there. And that's okay, as long as you need something that you did more than once. Right? I want to know you have some commitment. But I'm happy. I'm happy that you took the time to explore and to pursue. And it's just, how do you think about those? And why did you explore those things?
Yeah. I've been having to do some work myself in those areas of like writing down, like, what are your passions? Identify what your values are for something I'm starting. And it's not easy. And so I'll try to find some exercises and put into the show description. The students want to kind of try to go through that exercise of doing that, because I think once you can articulate or you can identify it, then you can be able to articulate it more thoughtfully and in your writing or in your interviews of what your passions and values are, so that people can really then feel your enthusiasm and feel where that fire is coming from inside about these things that you're pursuing. So
yes, I think so. I agree. And it helps that conversation, right? So I think that, and that ability to reflect, which, as you said, if you're going through thinking about what really are my passions, that you're having to do some reflection and some growth.
Yeah, it's not an easy exercise, but boy, it really, going through it is it's a fun process. I mean, it doesn't sound like fun, but it is, because then you really start to understand more of yourself. Like, you learn more about who you are. Let's see. Well, other things I wanted to ask you related to, let's talk about your interview day a little bit.
Okay.
Liesel, you guys do MMI.
Yes.
Right. And from what I read, it lasts about an hour, which kind of surprised me. I pictured MMI being a much longer process. Does it last about an hour?
It's an hour and 10 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. I do think every MMI is different from every school. Yeah. So we do a 7-station MMI. We give applicants 2 minutes to read the scenario, think about what their response is, and then we give them 6 minutes in the station. Yeah. And then they move from station to station. So our MMI is we're blinded. So the interviewer in the station, and it could be admissions faculty member or admissions committee student member that you're going to meet in the 7 stations. They don't know, they know your name and they see your picture so that when you come in the room, they know you are you. Yeah. But they don't have any other information on you. So it's really focused on the scenario. It's focused on your thinking. You're able to sort of talk through that and talk about that. We don't try not to do really controversial scenarios, really try to pitch the scenario on something that a pre-med probably has experienced. And so reading through all those experiences you share and say, ooh, let's pull something from this and write a scenario about it. And we have not adopted role playing in our MMIs. I know some schools are doing that. The closest we do is we may say, could you tell us how you would say that? Okay. Or could you reflect from the perspective of this person? But I certainly have heard of some scenarios where I don't know if we'll ever go there. Yeah. The sort of, the aggressive interviewer. My committee would not be able to carry that off.
Yeah. What about, do you provide, once somebody's invited to interview, do you provide them with any tips on how to prepare for MMI?
Now that's interesting. I wonder if we should. What we do is we do tell them the timelines. I have in my missions talks, we've talked a little bit about tips, and I share them because we're now virtual and we will probably be sticking with virtual for the foreseeable future. I do provide them some tips of that, of sort of how the software works and the system works and comfort on that. If I was going to give them tips, I think it's hard. I don't know what makes the difference between an acceptable answer and a shiny answer. I think it is making sure that you're a little bit conversational, which I think goes to that engagement, that you have some energy in the room. And that you help explain your thinking. I think some of the mistakes people do is often the scenario will end with 2 questions, like, what would you do? Or what's the problems? Or you want to, if you're going to come up with a solution, it's helpful for the interviewer to know how you came up to the solution. What did you consider? And so you don't want to appear wishy-washy, but also you don't want to think that you just have the answer and you didn't even think about what other possible answers might have been or what the problems might have been. Like, help them understand.
So it's okay if you kind of walk them through your thought process a little bit as you kind of like process the scenario, and then maybe they ask you some things like, what were your thought processes as you're walk them through that to get to your solution or to the response?
I think so. And then I think get comfortable with the timing. I think people think 6 minutes is not enough time. And so we don't use controversial, but I think if you could do an argument with a friend, and so take this topic and explain why you feel a certain way, right? And so maybe, I don't know even what it is. Let's take a big picture like race conscious admissions. Like, if you can argue that in 6 minutes, you'll know, 6 minutes is actually okay. I can express my feelings. I can explain why I'm arguing it this way. And I can even elaborate and take it to the next step. Like, not even just this scenario, but how is it relevant to the world? Maybe the world's too broad, but so I think doing that and practicing it a bunch makes you more comfortable that there is time in the scenario to be able to express this. And then I learned so much from other admissions deans, but that answer the question. Like, it's true. Make sure that you're not it's blinded for a reason. We really want to know your thinking in the moment about the scenario, right? If we have invited you for an interview, we think you're good. We think you're going to be great at our school, right? You don't have to sell your application to us. We've already invited you. We've already done that review. right? So focus on the scenario and your thoughts about that.
I'll get to the scenario, but first let me tell you a little bit about myself.
Right. And that won't work because you run out of time before you can answer the question.
Yeah, that's not gonna cut it. Okay. All right.
But I do, before the actual going into it, I do have all our applicants on the day of the interview meet with my director of admissions so that she can calm nerves a little bit. She can orient you. She can tell you exactly, okay, it's going to be 2 minutes. This is the button you're going to push, and then you're going to push this button. And she shares her stories, and she's so much better at it than I am.
Oh, come on.
She is great. And I think that it helps. It helps.
Price helps set the tone a little bit and just kind of calm the nerves and orient people to what to expect. Yeah. So is there in the MMI, is there any station that's just a one-on-one that we can talk a little bit about my application at all? Or is that more handled at the admissions committee level where they're looking just at everything at the end encapsulated where we see the application MMI results? And how does that work?
There is not. And we have annually, we debate that. Do we add a station? That's more of a one-on-one. So we may one year, but so far we have not. Some of our stations are a little bit broader, but they're
they can draw on maybe their experiences a little bit.
Right. It's maybe it's behavioral based instead of situation or scenario based. But we don't have talk about this PCV application or tell me why Robert would, or that does not happen in the interview itself. Yep.
Good to know. Okay. So after the interview day, how often do you notify students of when the decisions? Is it twice a year? Is it every couple of weeks?
We don't have fully admission, so it is twice a year. We'll do our first round of acceptances in December, and then the second round in March, usually March. That one can vary a little bit from cycle to cycle, sort of depending where my interviews are lining up. And I would say we accept half our class in December and half our class in March. So it doesn't matter if you're interviewing in the spring or the fall. And so we have students that, they're abroad, they're doing Fulbright something else. And so it's fine if they pick a later date. But you still have to get the application in earlier because we're giving away those interview spots early. Yep. And so you can't wait until the deadline to get that application finalized because all my interview spots, they're extremely limited. I am filling my spring interviews in December. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and you have more latitude earlier on to invite applicants, whereas as it gets closer to the deadline, you have far more limited spots to fill. Yeah,
it is. It's stressful for the applicant and it's stressful for the admissions office where you're like, oh my gosh, I only have 7 spots, which is what I'm looking at today.
Right. Yeah. And you probably still have a pretty good group of applicants to choose from. Yeah. Let's see. So after admissions committee, if somebody is not accepted right away and they're on your wait list or alternate list, do you want to hear from them? Can they send you updates, or is it more of a don't call us, we'll call you? We know you're out there.
We do accept updates. Okay. And I actually, if you are on my high priority alternate list, it is helpful to reach out. And part of the reason is if I've placed you on my high priority list in December, because that was the decision date, now it's May or April when we start looking at that list in April. Things change, and so it's helpful for me to know you're still interested. We don't look at letters of intent. My committee just assumes that's a letter of interest. They don't, no matter what words you put there, they are not going to take it. But we do like to know that you still are considering us. Yeah. Because the spots are limited at that point. And so we want to make sure that you're happy with us and we're happy with you. So yes, updates are allowed. I would not send an update every day.
Don't be a stalker.
In March, April, send an update. Mm-hmm. Let us know you're still considering us.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true, because some people, I'm glad you said that they let's say they're put on your alternate list in December, but in the meantime, between then and May, some other opportunities came about and it changed their direction. They're maybe looking someplace else, which it happens all the time, every year to every medical school. So it's good to know who's still out there and who's still interested, and that there's still, you guys are top of the list kind of thing for them. So they're just waiting to hear from you. Let's see. Anything else as far as post-interview day things that you like? You mentioned high priority list. Do you when you tell people that, or when you notify them, do you tell them they're high priority?
I do. Yeah. So we have an alternate list, and we do have 2 sections. So we will immediately make a decision on high priority or wait list, as we call it. Mm-hmm. So that is something that we do tell students as soon as we make the decision. I don't have a ranked high priority list at that point that we're making a decision. But we at least have that much to help. It's hard to be an applicant. It's hard to be there. And so that gives a little bit of sense of where you are at that stage in the process.
Can anybody move up to the high priority list? Or our
policy, I know, and here I'm like, do we share our policy? Yes. So our policy is we have to completely go through the high priority list before we can get to the wait list. Mm-hmm. So there are years where I do not move into the wait list, and we struggle with this. Mm-hmm. Like, should we even have a wait list? But I do,
you never know sometimes.
You never know. Every cycle is so different. Yeah.
Some years can be a revolving door, and other years it could be crickets, and it just kind of sits. So,
and I have not figured out a way to predict it.
I know.
Like, you talk to your region and other medical schools around you, and everybody's experiencing it differently. Every
year I get emails from and I get it. They're anxious. They want to know, and like, how many people did you take last year, or what's the possibility of getting up? Like, I have no idea. Like, you can't predict what's going to happen. I would love to know too. Like, I'd like to know.
I would love to know. Yeah. I do tell people, you know what, check, if you're in my high priority list, check back mid-May. I may be able to have a little bit of a sense. Like, I can't totally predict, but if it's been crickets for 2 weeks in May, my hopes are diminishing a little bit, and I'll share that with you.
Yeah. But then if it's crickets for 2 weeks, I'm like, okay, when's it going to happen then? Like, who hasn't in the domino, the cascading effect, who hasn't done anything yet? And then it's going to hit when I'm going on vacation.
Now I know you don't go on vacation in May.
I never go on vacation.
It's true. Yeah. So it is never 100%. I can guarantee you, or I can even give you a 90% possibility answer. It's more, still think there's a good chance, or I'm not sure there's a chance. I really have no clue.
Oh gosh. Cool. This is, we've hit some really, I'm so glad, Liesel, that we were able to get together, because there's been some really helpful parts of our conversation I think that people are listening are really value, because you've been so honest and transparent. I'm so grateful for that. Is there anything else you would like to impart on listeners, just in general?
In general, use your resources, ask questions. I think it's important. It's a long process. We know it's a long process, but there is help, and it's, you have to be proactive and you have to be engaged. You had asked, and just sort of in the last seconds, of what do we do after acceptance? We do have a visit day. And so we will have an option for students to come to campus. And if they can't make our visit day, we will have times where maybe they can do a tour. My admissions ambassadors, our current students, are so helpful with that. We have a Zoom meeting with our students for those that are interviewing. So you get a little bit of a feel of the culture.
Yeah.
It's asynchronous, so it's not on your interview day, but it definitely is something that's scheduled during the cycle, so that you definitely have time to connect. You have time to meet with a dean from the Office of Education to also to get that faculty perspective as well.
Yeah. So you can kind of get a little bit of insight prior to interview day on some of those offerings that are kind of sprinkled throughout the interview season.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Liesel, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I think people listening and those that are now jazzed about Robert Wood Johnson Medical School are grateful too. So I really thank you so much.
Yep. No, it was wonderful. It was great fun to be here. And I enjoyed this. Enjoyed a chance to talk.
Yeah. And I hope to see you on another panel soon.
Yes. Thank you.
See you around. Thanks.